I was suspended by Twitter for telling the truth. I stated a fact. Twitter, the company, did not like me stating a fact, and so they turned my Twitter account off. To get back into Twitter, I was required to delete my truthful tweet, which I did so I could go back into Twitter and tell them that I still believed everything I said. And I don't care that Twitter is controlled by Boko Haram and the woke terrorists of America. But Laurel Hubbard is a man. And that is what I tweeted. Now, I tweeted it just so you have the full context. Allie Beth Stuckey, the Christian writer, commented on Laurel Hubbard being a man and should not be allowed to compete against women. And Twitter turned her account off. And my tweet was, whether Twitter likes it or not, Laurel Hubbard actually is a man. This is absurd, I said, about the Allie Beth Stuckey banning. Laurel Hubbard is a man even if Twitter doesn't like it. So Twitter turned my account off for 12 hours and told me that I was promoting violence, threatening, or harassing someone based on their gender identity. I was not promoting violence. This, again, linking to a story about Allie Beth Stuckey being banned from Twitter. This is my exact tweet. This is absurd, period. Laurel Hubbard is a man even if Twitter doesn't like it, period. That's my entire tweet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 words. That's it. I wasn't harassing anyone. I wasn't threatening anyone. I wasn't promoting violence against anyone. I said a statement of fact. Laurel Hubbard is a man. Now, I realize there are people out there in America today who have been just seized by a psychosis, a moral panic, a wildfire of psychoses running through Western society right now, where people believe that you can change your sex. Well, now let's pay attention here, because just a few years ago, it was your sex was biologically predetermined at birth, and your gender you could change. Sex was immutable, gender was not. Now, just within 5 years of that, suddenly, sex and gender are both social constructs. And if you point out someone's sex is a man, and they decide they're not, then you're a hateful bigot, when really all you're doing is telling the truth. There certainly are people who are intersex. Sex is determined by your chromosomes. Girls have 2 X's, boys have an XY. The father of the baby is, frankly, determines the sex. Why? Because the mother's egg is always an X chromosome. The father's sperm could be an X or a Y. And the joining of the two provides an X and an X, or an X and a Y. Now, there are some people, biological abnormalities, that have multiple chromosomes there. So you can have XXXXXXXY, XYXX, and XYXY. But it is the first 2 pairings that actually determine your biological sex. Now, there are some people who have the male and female organs. One tends to almost in every case be dominant. But it is, in most cases, fairly obvious that someone is meant to be a male or female. And it is most often because of that first 2 chromosomes, the X and the Y, or the X and the X. That's basic biology. Outside of genetic abnormalities, mutations, this is standard science. This is standard biology. Now, in postmodern times, and we are in postmodernism, the exceptions become the rule and the rule becomes the exception. So the exceptions to the rule are the XYXX intersex genetic abnormality. And so the left, progressives in postmodernism, have taken that and made it the rule. And the biological rule is now the exception, but it's not. I mean, science doesn't care about your social constructs. The people who say follow the science and that the science is settled should realize that if you follow the science to settled science, you settle upon biology. People are in the class of mammals within the animal kingdom. Within that class of animals called mammals, there is a family called hominids. And within that family of hominids, there is the genus of Homo and the species Sapien. We are the Homo sapien. Within the hominids, those are the apes. There is not a single species that can pick its own sex. In fact, within the entire class of animals known as mammals, there is not a single animal in the mammalian class that picks its sex. There are animals, fish and gastropods, that can be male and then female or female and then male, and it's out of biological natural necessity, and their bodies are naturally born in that way. Clownfish, for example. But clownfish are not people. Clownfish are fish. They are not mammals. They are not hominids. They are not human beings. It is a particular arrogance of people to think that we are somehow different from all the other hominids. After years of saying we're just another animal, we're another form of mammal, we're another hominid, now you've got some people left say, well, actually, we're a special class. Actually, there's a spiritualism there. Now, in theistic creation, God makes us male and female. In Darwinian evolution, it's a process of natural selection through evolution where the fittest survive. Transgenderism falls out of both. The purpose of the species in Darwinian evolution is the perpetuation and survival of the species. And it is the non-gendered genetic abnormality that is the exception to the rule there. In Darwinian evolution and in theistic creation, it is the woman who gets pregnant, not the man. And if you are capable of getting pregnant, you are the female of the species. And that is the way it works for every mammal, including mankind. And then along came the wokes and said, shut up. You're not allowed to say that anymore. You may not be able to say it, but it's pervasive in the science. That's just the way it is. So Twitter may not like the fact that I said Laurel Hubbard is a man, but genetically, Laurel Hubbard is a man. Laurel Hubbard did not transition until 2012. None of us should indulge in a lie for the sake of someone's self-esteem, including this lie. It's not healthy for society. I know there are some Christian apologists out there now who say Christians should just give up the fight on pronouns. We're not giving up the fight on sexuality. We're not giving up the fight on male and female. We're just going to let people have their pronouns. I'm sorry, but I think that sounds like surrender. You're negotiating with yourself against the people who have no intention of negotiating with you. They want you to either accept not their pronoun, but their actual identity or not. And there are some things you just cannot accept if you're committed to the truth. That's just the reality of it. They can shut me up. They can shut Allie Beth Stuckey up. They can shut up everyone else. But the fact of the matter is, biology itself is not going to suddenly silence itself in the face of the woke. Science, biology, human evolution continues to move on. And thus far in human evolution, we are not at a place where human beings have the ability to change their sex. It's called science. It's not hate. It's not hateful. It's not bigoted. It's called being a class of animal called a mammal. If you would prefer to identify as a gastropod or a fish, I guess you can, but then jump in a lake and hold your breath and see what happens. And you'll find out, guess what? You're not. The problem here is that corporate America is doing the bidding of the wokes now. Corporate America is doing the bidding of the wokes. The wokes are an ideology. Their ideology tilts towards communism. That is a statement of fact as well. You may not like it, but it does. And in communist and totalitarian regimes, whether you're talking the fascists, the Nazis, the communists, they have a habit of using corporations to advance their agenda before they become dominant and lock themselves into state control. You know, when Stalin was in charge of the Soviet Union, he very famously got rid of a picture of Nikolai Yezhov. Yezhov was a security agent, the top security agent. He fell out of favor with Stalin. There was a picture of Stalin and him walking together. And one of the earliest uses of a Photoshop, so to speak, they deleted him from the picture, so it looked like Stalin walking by himself. They disappeared him. And essentially, that's what the wokes want corporate America to do. They want corporate America to silence and disappear other people. They want corporate America to silence and disappear people like me and Allie Beth Stuckey for pointing out a basic truth. And the only way to really stand up to it is to keep speaking the truth. Now, there's going to be societal fallout, and some of your kids, I'm afraid, are going to be caught up in this stuff. Our family knows kids who are caught up in this stuff. It is a social contagion, if you will. In fact, particularly in a number of schools that have a high number of autistic kids, there have been multiple studies that show if one kid decides to transition, suddenly a lot of the kids say that they're transgender as well. And it's clearly something that sweeps through. It's like the water fountain at your church where one pregnant woman drinks and then suddenly every woman in church is pregnant. It's the same way with this transgenderism stuff. Is one kid in a school comes out as transgender, half the kids in the school decide they're transgender, unless the parents have some level of grounding to explain what's going on to their kids, and instead of just going along and affirming the nonsense. There is a madness sweeping through Western society. And ironically, for a group of people who are hominids in the class of animals called mammals, it is unique to the Western Homo sapien that this is a problem. You rarely find transgenderism to be an issue in Eastern Europe, in Africa, in Asia, or in South America. It is almost to a person, white and Western European and American Canadian, and the like. It's fascinating where this social contagion has spread. And it's also something where you can see it's not real, because the only way for them to try to convince people it's real is to shut up anyone who disagrees. You're not winning the argument if you're silencing people. You're just silencing people. You've given up on trying to win, on trying to explain yourself, on trying to show that the science supports it, when you're just screaming down everyone else and making them shut up. It's kind of an admission against interest that the science doesn't back them up. They've gone from the epigenetics nonsense that turns out actually to really be mostly nonsense into just telling people, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Shut up. And then getting people fired, getting people taken off the radio, getting people taken off television, getting people taken off the internet for daring to dissent from their ideology. And therein lies the rub. It becomes an ideology. And that's the real problem here. Now, this segues into a problem of insularity from other ideas. And there's so much more data out there now showing progressives flat out do not have a lot of conservative friends. They are in an orbit of themselves where they can believe things that simply aren't true and then get mad at you for daring to disagree with them, in large part because they've never encountered the idea. They've never had to think about it. And what the transgender activists want to do is make sure that no one ever has to think about science and biology and ask legitimate questions, because it's the only way they can pull this one over on society itself. Again, when you've got to shut up everyone else, you're not winning the argument. And it's an admission against interest when Twitter has to, on behalf of Boko Haram, silence people for saying a simple truth that they know this isn't real. They just can't afford to acknowledge that what they're saying isn't true because, well, they're on the side of the wokes.